Hi, I'm Kimberly Zachrison. I'm the Assistant Attorney General for the Elder Abuse and Financial Exploitation Unit. Started back in 2016, the legislature decided to put a task force together to start looking into the crimes that were affecting the elderly in the state of South Dakota. From that, we put together a unit here at the Attorney General's office. It consists of 3 people, myself as the prosecutor. We have an investigator/coordinator that works with the Department of Criminal Investigation, and then we also have a criminal analyst. The 3 of us make up the unit. We work alongside local law enforcement and the local state's attorneys to investigate and prosecute crimes involving the elderly and people with disability. We also collect data for all the elder abuse and financial exploitation tips that come into the state. According to the law, it's somebody who's 65 years of age or older. Now, most people out there who are over the age of 65 will say, I'm not an elderly person. That's true, but according to the law, you are. So you have to get over it. We also have disabled adults. Now, those are people who are over the age of 18, who are intellectually or physically disabled, who can't protect themselves or care for themselves. They are also covered under all the elder abuse statutes. There's physical abuse. You should know what that is. There's sexual abuse. You should know what that is too. We have neglect, which for the most part is people who don't take care of the elderly or a disabled adult. The harder ones are emotional and psychological abuse. It's not necessarily just being mean to somebody, but it is constant physical threats, demeaning, verbal harassment, things like that. It's not like your kid's in the back seat yelling, "Stop touching me." That's not emotional abuse. Although some days it feels like it's psychological. The last type of abuse is financial abuse. Now this one gets kind of complicated, and this is where most of the time our office gets involved. The very basic definition and simplest way to figure it out is you are in charge of somebody else's money, and instead of using that money on the other person, you start using it on yourself. That's financial abuse. Now, many times when we're dealing with financial abuse, we have powers of attorneys and guardianships and things like that. Don't worry, we're not going to get involved into that today. That's for another time. So to break it down, you put someone else in charge of your money. They have an obligation to then take care of you, to make sure that you have food, clothing, and shelter. If they do these things, great, no problem. If they don't do these things, and instead of taking your money and taking care of you, they start taking that money and using it on themselves, well, that's a crime. They take that money, go buy a boat, take a trip to Europe, that's a crime. Now, many times we get calls in our office about people who are not paying their nursing home bills or electric bills or things like that. Unfortunately, that's not a crime. That's a civil matter, unless, on top of not paying the nursing home bills or the electric bill, the money instead is being spent on something else, like that boat or that trip to Europe. So if we have some information about spending the money on other things besides food, clothing, and shelter, then we can get that information, get a subpoena, and start looking into somebody's bank records and find out where that money is really going. So what are some signs that somebody might be financially abused? Well, one way is to start looking at their spending habits. If there's somebody who spent once a month, they went and got a haircut, then that's normal spending for them. But if it's all of a sudden out of nowhere, there's a $500 tab down at the local bar, well, that seems pretty strange. That's something you might want to look into. For those of you out there who work in banking and you start noticing strange patterns where they're all of a sudden coming in and taking out large sums of money or sending large sums of money to somebody they normally don't spend money to, that's kind of a red flag. Also, look for changes in wills or other documents that they normally would have. If all of a sudden a grandkid comes out of the woodwork that nobody knew about and all of a sudden the will gets turned over to that kid, that's kind of a red flag there too. If you're in somebody's home and you notice that, the really good candlesticks are all of a sudden gone, that's kind of a red flag too. If you see any of these signs or are just suspicious about something going on, contact your local law enforcement, your local state's attorney's office, or you can contact the Department of Human Services. They'll take your information, start investigating, and they'll send that information to us here at the Attorney General's office. According to the law, the Attorney General's office gets all this information. We are a housing unit for collecting all this data, and then we can go out there and assist these different law enforcement agencies and state's attorneys in these investigations. Thanks for now. See you next week.